Howdy my totally tubular gamers, and we are back for yet again another ranking video. Today's ranking video is going to be on the Uncharted series. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Uncharted, but if you're not, let me bring you up to speed real quick. Uncharted is a series of third-person shooters developed by Naughty Dog, the same developers of the original Crash trilogy and the Jak and Daxter trilogy. The series got started on the PS3, where it became one of the PS3's main attractions, one of their must-see games, and there was the 3 main Uncharteds on the PS3. However, they actually continued the series on the PS4 for 2 games as well. And in addition to this, there have been 2 spin-offs that were on the PS Vita that were not by Naughty Dog. Over the years, Uncharted has received very high praise from critics and gamers, and some of these games are some of the highest rated games in existence. The games were praised for their cinematic qualities, their excellent stories, their lifelike characters, the 3D platforming that was very well done, its superb puzzles, and of course, some really good shooting. And over the years, I've dabbled in the Uncharted series more than once. In fact, I've played all the games. I even bought my PS4 for Uncharted 4, so it's obvious here that I am a bit of a fan of the Uncharted series as well. And I thought it would be fun to rank all the Uncharted games, to have them all face off, which is the best Uncharted, which is the worst Uncharted. With all that said, there will be no spoilers in this video. I will only be bringing up the general plot synopsis at most, and that will be it. We're going to be ranking these games based on quality, and we'll be taking everything into consideration. And this will just be my opinion, of course, because with a series as beloved as Uncharted, there's going to be some disagreements. So if you have a disagreement, let me know in the comments. Either way, let me know in the comments what your favorite Uncharted is. Make sure to like the video, sub, share, all that great stuff. And so, let's just get right into it. Now, what do I think is the worst Uncharted game of them all? I think the worst Uncharted game is a game that most people probably don't even know exists, and that is Uncharted Fight for Fortune. So Uncharted Fight for Fortune was made by Bend Studio and is on the PS Vita. It is a digital collectible card game. This is a very basic turn-based card game that just sees you trying to reduce the other player's health to nothing using characters, scenes, and objects from the Uncharted series. Now, to keep it real, I don't really like card games, especially video game card games. Like, if I'm gonna go play a card game, I'm gonna go hang out with my friends and we're gonna go play Uno or something. Like, I'm not even a fan of Gwent, really, from The Witcher 3, but that's a little different. That's good. This is a very basic card game that really has nothing going for it. It did have online multiplayer, but there's no way anyone's playing this now. In all honesty, this looks like it belongs more on my phone rather than the PS Vita, and if it was on my phone, I wouldn't even be ranking it. So I don't have much experience with it. I doubt most people have any experience with it, and that's why I feel that it is the worst Uncharted game, as it has very little to offer and really doesn't belong in the Uncharted series at all. The next Uncharted game is the other Uncharted game not made by Naughty Dog, and that is Uncharted Golden Abyss for the Vita, also by Bend Studio. The game was a launch title for the Vita and was one of the games that really showed the Vita's power, and you know, even to this day I still think it looks pretty impressive for a Vita game. Golden Abyss actually takes place before all the other Uncharted games, and it sees Nathan Drake looking for the lost city of Quivira. And when it comes to the gameplay, this is an Uncharted game through and through. This really plays like the other Uncharted games, where you get into third-person shooting, there's 3D platforming that gets done, there's puzzle solving, and a gripping narrative. This is a full-length, portable Uncharted experience, which is actually pretty impressive. Like, it was impressive then, and it's impressive now that the Vita has something like this. The controls are pretty good for the most part, but the game does use the Vita's motion and touch control functions. This is very annoying, and I don't like that the game uses this. Now, it doesn't get used all that much, and everything else, when it comes to the controls, is actually very solid, and it's impressive how solid the controls are. This is a good game, and if you're looking for a portable Uncharted, well, this isn't a crummy card game, so you could do worse. I'm honestly surprised that the game has not received any kind of a home console re-release, as I think the game would benefit from that, not only sales-wise, but exposure-wise, as I feel a lot of people didn't play this because it was on the Vita, and thought, oh, it's just a discount Uncharted, but no, this is really a full Uncharted game that is worth experiencing. It's only so low on the list because the other Uncharted games are just that good, but I'd still recommend this, especially if you have a PS Vita. The next game on our list might be a more recognizable one. Here we have the original Uncharted, Drake's Fortune, released on the PS3 by Naughty Dog in 2007. This game really pushed Naughty Dog to the forefront of being a great developer, as it did have a wonderful story, excellent gameplay, and was one of the PS3's killer apps, especially at the beginning. The game is about Nathan Drake, self-proclaimed ancestor of Sir Francis Drake, and he teams up with a reporter, Elena Fisher, and his mentor, Sully, and the three of them basically go treasure hunting and are trying to find El Dorado. The game plays out more like Indiana Jones than really any of the other Uncharted games, and the story is a lot more simple compared to some of the later Uncharted games, but that's not a bad thing, as the game is still very cinematic and the story is still very good. Back when this game came out, this whole cinematic style that has become very commonplace in Sony games now was totally not prevalent. In fact, I can't really think of any other games that did this at this time. And the game was heralded greatly for this, and I still think that it is very good. However, I feel that when you compare it to the other Uncharted games, yeah, this game is definitely at the bottom in the main series. This game is still very good, obviously, it's just the other games are that great. Coming back to this game all these years later, you can really see where Uncharted improved, and I have not tried the PS4 version, but I'm sure that makes it a lot smoother than this original PS3 version, which has a number of clunky aspects. The shooting is serviceable, the platforming is rough around the edges, and the puzzles are pretty annoying. In fact, there's a lot of puzzles in this game, more so than probably any of the other Uncharted games, and yeah, I was just really annoyed by them by the end of the game. Some of the set pieces were questionable in this game, like the jet ski segment, that just wasn't very good. The game does have some graphical issues here and there, but I mean, it still looked phenomenal for the time, and it still looks pretty good today. If you've played some of the later Uncharted games and come back to this one like I did, it might feel clunky in some aspects, but it's still worth experiencing, and it still does tell a pretty good tale. It reminds me of a simpler time, before every PlayStation game had to be cinematic like this. Good times. Our next game is Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, which is actually the most recent Uncharted game, coming out in 2017. The Lost Legacy is a standalone expansion to Uncharted 4 and is the only game to not feature Nathan Drake. The game is about Chloe Fraser, Drake's old friend and ex-lover, and it's about her going to India to look for the Tusk of Ganesh. She is eventually joined by Nadine Ross, one of the antagonists from Uncharted 4. Despite Drake not being there, I still thought the plot was actually pretty good. I'm not going to say it was like amazing or as good as some of the other Uncharted games, but I still thought it was a very solid enough plot. I like Chloe, I like her as a protagonist, and I think she's a very natural fit, and if they were going to continue the Uncharted series for whatever reason, it would probably be with Chloe. I will say though, the ending kind of irked me the wrong way. Now when it comes to the gameplay, it is very similar to Uncharted 4 since it is a standalone expansion. Chloe can do everything that Drake can do, if not arguably better. She's just as acrobatic, can do lots of jumping and swimming and swinging on vines. She's very good with her weapons, can use all of them very efficiently, kills a lot of people, like a lot of people, just like Drake. She can be stealthy about it and take them out one at a time, sneakily. She can get into some fistfights and really hold her own, and then she gets to even drive vehicles, something Drake doesn't even get to do all that much. Something the Lost Legacy tries to do a bit differently is its linearity. Now, obviously, the Uncharted series is very linear. It's point A to B, there's only one way to get to that location, and that's really all of the games. However, the Lost Legacy introduces this new mechanic where you're dropped into these big open areas and you can explore. This isn't an open world per se, but it is certainly more non-linear, and there's even little side objectives and collectibles to find in this area. This would go on to be very prevalent in The Last of Us 2, and I think it's handled a lot better in that game than this game, but it is a welcome change of pace for the Uncharted series. I remember when this game came out, there were a number of people that said that this game didn't need to exist or come out, and it was Sony just kind of cash grabbing with the Uncharted name, and to an extent I still agree with that, but I think this is still a pretty solid game. Obviously the shooting and mechanics are still very well done. The game is a bit shorter than the other Uncharted games and has less memorable set pieces overall, but it is still a solid enough game, and I'm sure it's pretty cheap nowadays, so if you haven't checked it out, maybe you should check it out. The third best Uncharted game, I feel, is Uncharted 3 by Naughty Dog in 2011. I remember back when the game came out, it was very hype, I was very hype, and now a decade later, yikes, a decade really? It is still a very good game. The game is about Drake teaming up with Sully as they go look for the lost city of Aram of the Pillars. When it comes to all the Uncharted games, this plot definitely feels the most by the numbers and just kind of standard for an Uncharted game, with a lot of tropes and similar plot devices that are used from the previous two games, and not all that many new plot devices are really here. The game tries to flush out Drake and Sully's past, and there's a number of flashbacks, and they really give some context to how they know each other, and it shows Drake growing up, and I thought that was a nice touch for sure. The plot was obviously still very good, and the game is still very cinematic. I just thought when it came to the story, it felt a little weaker than the next two games. The gameplay though is as solid as ever, as it really takes the previous two Uncharted games and really tries to build on it with a ton of new set pieces. In fact, this game has arguably the best set piece of the entire series, with Drake flying out of the plane onto the desert, which was very iconic. That was all the promotional and marketing material, and it's ingrained in my head to this day. The game looked absolutely stunning for the time, and the motion capture technology was absolutely on point, and it just looked excellent. The melee combat was really improved from the previous two games and was a lot more fleshed out here with a lot more contextual actions, which looked awesome and still feel awesome to this day. If you loved the previous two Uncharted games, no reason you're not going to love this game, as it really just is a refinement mostly on the gameplay. The game even had some solid enough co-op and multiplayer for the time. I remember you needed a stupid online pass, but there's no way that anybody's playing the multiplayer nowadays, so that's just a dead feature. You absolutely cannot go wrong with Uncharted 3, as it was just a superb game. Now in the number 2 spot, we have the absolute fan favorite that is Uncharted 2 Among Thieves, which came out in 2009. When Uncharted 2 came out, it was all the hype, it was all the rage, it was all the talk, and it was the game that really just showed that Naughty Dog really is one of the best developers in gaming just ever. Of course, I already knew this, of course, with Jak and Daxter in the original Crash, but now the mainstream public knew as well. Uncharted 2 really took a look at the original Uncharted and said, how can we make this better? And they really just made it better. They made it better in like every single aspect. The game is about Drake, who teams up with Chloe Frazer and Elena Fisher as they search for this legendary stone and battle a mercenary group. The story is a lot more complex than the original games, with a lot more twists and turns and just general characters, and a lot of the characters are a lot more fleshed out here with a lot more detail, backstory, lore, etc. If you thought that the first game felt like a Hollywood experience, then this game will absolutely blow you away when it comes to that Hollywood experience, as it was easily the most cinematic game ever made when this game came out. It really just blew gamers away with its attention to detail, its great story, its superb voice acting, and awesome set pieces. In fact, the main set piece, the prologue of the game, has to be one of the greatest set pieces in any video game ever, and one of the most iconic prologues to any video game. I mean, it's on the cover of the game. It's arguably one of the best train levels in any video game either, which says a lot. There's some really nice train levels in games. The shooting feels a hell of a lot better than the first Uncharted, and it feels a lot smoother, it's a lot snappier, and it's definitely more satisfying. The platforming feels really well done also, like it's very smooth, it's intuitive, and it just feels really nice to just be platforming in this game and going through its beautiful environments. While the first game was primarily a jungle, and really it was just only a jungle, this game has tons of different environments. You'll go through the snowy landscapes, these dark caves, and even more, and I really like the variety here. The game just tries to constantly mix it up, and I think that it really does a great job at that, and it constantly does feel different, and all the environments feel really different from each other. The puzzles were, well, they were there, they were still kind of annoying, but there's less of them and they're easier, I can say that. The game also had a multiplayer when it launched, which I honestly always thought multiplayer was kind of tacked on to Uncharted 2, but I mean, it was there. This game has gone on to be most people's favorite in the series, and while I think it is obviously stellar, it's very good, and it's spectacular, it's not my favorite in the series. It's not what I think is the best, but of course I have zero problem recommending it. I think the best in the series is Uncharted 4: A Thief's End, released by Naughty Dog in 2016 for the PS4. It was the reason I bought a PS4. So maybe there's some bias here, but I think Uncharted 4 really was just the pinnacle of the series, and I think that it was the series' highest point. The game sees Drake in retirement. He's a retired treasure hunter. He lives a peaceful life with Elena. However, he comes out of retirement when his long presumed dead brother Samuel apparently shows up. So Drake teams up with Sully for one last adventure as they look for Henry Avery's long lost treasure. I thoroughly enjoyed the story, and I thought that the game was the most cinematic of all the Uncharted games, and I really liked how it plays out, and I loved the ending. I thought it was bittersweet. I thought that the story overall felt the most different from all the other Uncharted games. It didn't just feel like another story of Drake trying to get the treasure. It felt genuinely different, and it was about him connecting with his long-believed dead brother, and I really like that interaction. I really like all the interactions, and the characters were really great in this game. And when it comes to the gameplay, of course this is going to be the most refined of the Uncharted games. It's the latest in the main series, but it really is the most refined and plays the best. The shooting is the best that it's ever been in the series, as it feels very snappy, it's very accurate, and it's very refined, and it feels really nice to just gun people down, which Drake does a ton of in this game. The platforming and just general traversal is very well done. Also, there's a ton of new aspects to it, such as the rope with the rope physics and swinging and all that great stuff. And I just really like these additions. It feels like natural additions to the Uncharted series, and if they were going to add anything to the series, it would probably be this, or the new somewhat open areas. For the first time in the series, it wasn't a straight point A to B extremely linear adventure. They actually tried to make some non-linear areas, and while it isn't even as open as The Lost Legacy and nowhere near as open as, say, Last of Us 2's areas, they still tried to do something different with this, and I think that it's actually pretty good. I like these big open areas that you get to just take on enemies however you want. You can be stealthy, you can gun them all down, there's hidden collectibles in these. I really like these somewhat open areas. I thought the puzzles were the least intrusive, I can say that. And then when it came to the game's presentation and graphics and character models and all of that stuff, like, it is just absolutely incredible. This game still looks phenomenal. It looked beyond phenomenal when it came out. It was one of the greatest looking games ever when it came out, and it still looks absolutely impressive. It's very impressive for the PS4. It's impressive for the PS5, and just look at it. It's amazing. The attention to detail is just totally there, and some of these set pieces are just absolutely brought to life by it. I think that while the set pieces aren't exactly the most memorable in the series, I think that they are still incredibly well done, and I still think that they're all very good. There's not a single bad set piece in this game, and the variety is the highest in this game than arguably the entire series. The game had some pretty cool multiplayer that didn't feel totally tacked on, and then it also had some nice co-op stuff here as well. In the end, I think Uncharted 4 is just one of the greatest third-person shooters ever made. It's one of Naughty Dog's best games, which really says a lot, and I think it's just, again, the pinnacle of the series. You can't really go wrong with it. In fact, you can't really go wrong with like any of these games, especially the Naughty Dog ones. And they're all great games, and Uncharted as a whole is just a great series, and Sony really knows what they have here because they really draw it out, Uncharted. Either way, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Tell me what your favorite is in the comments if you haven't already. Love hearing that stuff. Subscribe and like, share, comment, all that stuff. Anyway, have a good Christmas, New Year's, Valentine's Day, American Day. I don't know. Have a good one. See ya.